Well, I guess first you have to really want to do it, because if you don't really want to do it, you're never going to do it. And you have to do it because you need to do it. There's no choice, but you need to do it. And you're not going to do it for any other reason than just needing to do it. And someone said to me just recently that you can't put all that pressure on your artwork to like give you fulfilling your soul, fulfilling every part of everything you need in this world, and then make your money. And I thought that was maybe where we all went wrong.
Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to Rodney Veal's Inspired By. I'm your host, Rodney Veal, and today I get to have a wonderful, wonderful conversation with an artist whose visions and ideas and working in materials on a large and a small scale that are just awe-inspiring, that work that will delight you, pause you, make you think, consider your humanity, and just it's literal but not literal. It's a dichotomy of the context and the subtext of your psyche. There's so much going on in her work and in her life, and she's just this bundle of creative energy and a force of nature, and just an awesome lady. Petah Coyne, how are you? And welcome to the podcast, because I can't wait to have a conversation about materials. That's just my jam.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to be here.
This is so exciting. And so it feels a little bit like we're going down I call it the hot tub time machine of life. Like, let's go back into the past. But the reality, it all starts somewhere. Do you know what I'm saying? And so with your creativity and being an artist, and in looking at your bio and going through your history, you traveled as a child. You weren't a native Daytonian, but you became a Daytonian, and there's a very distinctive thing there. But yes. What talk about that journey? Because from Oklahoma to Dayton, that's a 12-year span. So it's like, what were you doing? Like, what was your family doing?
Well, my father's military, and we traveled all the time. We moved 15 times before I was even 12. And we constantly moved. It was how we lived. I thought everybody lived that way. Every 6 months you pick up, you move. But the interesting thing about my family was that we never lived on the Army bases. My dad, he really didn't want us to be Army brats, and there were a lot of those. And I didn't know that. We just lived in the ethnic neighborhood of whatever country or place we were living. And in Hawaii, we lived in a Japanese neighborhood. And I, of course, was very young and didn't fully grasp what that meant. And that was not long after World War II. And to live in a Japanese neighborhood, and my father being a military officer, I can imagine he took so much for that. But he didn't care. He thought the culture of the Japanese people was so beautiful. And he also believed really strongly that bygones were bygones, and he wanted everything to be peaceful. And he was really hoping to be stationed in Japan and not Hawaii, although Hawaii was beautiful. And in the end, I don't know if he was glad or sad about that, but we lived there. And the interesting thing that he did was he was to bring there were a lot of men that had done the Bataan Death March that were stationed in Hawaii before they made their trips back to the United States. And these were damaged men. And he would bring them to our home on Sunday nights. And we were always told, and we were small children, we were 3, 5, and 7 at that time. And my parents would tell us, you have to act like you're in vats of honey. They always played games with us, made everything fun, moving, everything was fun. And they said, you have to act like you're in vats of honey. That's how slow you have to move around these men. And so we thought, oh, what fun. So we would move because any sharp movement would upset these men because they had just had their nerves shot. They were just shot. And so we would move very, very, like snails, my mother would say, like snails, because we had lots of snails in the backyard. We had a beautiful tiered Japanese garden up the hill and moved so slowly. And so I loved this game to move slowly because they would give us a little gift, whoever moved the slowest and the most beautiful. And there was one guy who I really loved, and sometimes he would never even look at us. But I used to sit under his chair and pretend I tied a little string around my arm and to his ankle to keep him from floating up into the clouds because I just loved him. So we played all kinds of games like that. I didn't have a string. I just pretended, and he was a very special guest. And I grew to really love him. He came every year for a year and a half to our house. And when he did look at me, his face would just shine and look at you. He really looked at you, but he didn't look very often. And I waited for the times for him to look at us. Very special.
And see, that's the whole thing I always think about when I've talked to artists in the past. It's like these vivid memories, memory rooted in a sense of the senses are being recounted. It's not just the visual image, it's the sensations, it's the light, it's the feeling of touch, it's the how your hands were moving. You were in that sense of storytelling, and I just think how special that your parents found a way to kind of incorporate that sense of playfulness into your everyday existence. And because that explains some things about going forward into your life as an art maker. Did you always think as a child, did you think that this was the world you were going to inhabit? Or did you think you were going to be a writer? Because I think I have questions about that. What was the thought process as a child?
Oh, always an artist.
Always.
Since I was 2 or 3, I knew I would be an artist. Always. There was never a question. My parents, although they wanted us to be highly educated, but they could care less where we were educated. And because we moved so much, we changed schools constantly. And my parents would pull us out of school for absolutely any reason. They didn't care. If there was anything happening about anything. And I remember when there was a beached whale in Hawaii, and it was sick, and it was on Waikiki. My mother went and got us out of school. Well, the nuns were incensed. Like, how do you take your children? They're hardly ever here. Take them out of school. And my mother said, there's a beached whale. We have to go see it. And all my friends were like, your mother takes you out of school to go see a beach? I want your mother. And she went and got my little, I know, right? And she brought us crayons and lunch, and she said to us, now you have to write a story, and you have to draw a picture, and you have to make up the life of this whale. And I looked at her and I said, Mom, I don't know about this whale. And she said, of course you do. Of course you do. You go snorkeling in the ocean. You look at that whale. It's old, and look at every mark it has. Each mark has a tail that is so huge. Come on now, Petah, you know. And I was like, of course I know. Of course I know. And I went over and started drawing. And she said, tonight at dinner, we're all going to tell our stories, and they're going to be marvelous. And I said, yes, marvelous. So at dinner, we all told our stories to my dad. And of course, being the little brat that I was, all three of us told our stories, and I thought my story was the best, even better than my older brother, although maybe his was a little better, but I was 2 years younger than him, so I felt like, well, maybe equal. And that night, my mother said, all right, after we do the dishes, I'm going to read to you a story of another man who had a whale that he was after his whole life. And I was like, oh, okay. So that night she started to read to us Moby Dick. Well, who reads to their children Moby Dick at that age, right? But as soon as she started to read to us, I was like, oh, his story is so much better than mine. I've got to do some work here, and that's what they would always do to us, challenge us, but then show us something better. But not that they would make us feel bad. They would encourage us in
It was
such a
like
way,
to kind of, well, it was
inspire us.
and inspire you. And so,
Yes.
well, and it's a way of exposing a child without the baggage of why you're being exposed to it. Do you know what I'm saying? That
Yes, exactly.
it's like, and
100%, Rodney.
so that is, and these stories that and like I said, when I interview other artists, that sense of these parents, these special parents who just knew this is the way to do it. And that's, and I just encourage, like, I want to say, all our listeners, if you're a parent out there, you lead by inspiration, not just by example. Inspiration, inspire them, because
Yeah.
that's where the creativity kind of grows. And I could tell that you had an active imagination as a child. I mean, there is no way the work that you create now is not just based in, let me study theory, let me go to college. I mean, yeah, okay. I mean, those things have validity in our art making practice, but I think there's something to be said about the life that is lived prior
Mhm.
to picking up the crayon and the paper and the wax and the taxidermy. I mean, I said about materials, I am like, wait, what? I don't know why I geek out about materials. I honestly believe that there's something about materiality, because I'm so used to creating dance, which is ephemeral and movement, and it doesn't exist. It only exists in that present manifestation. And so I'm always intrigued by what the solidity of materials and what that speaks, and the language. And you use that saying that there was a statement you made about that material is language. And so that's why I thought, oh, she's into writing. And then I started going. So I just kind of curious about, you knew you were going to be an artist, and you knew this was, you're in this rich imaginative world that your parents have set up for you and your siblings. How did that translate coming to, I hate to say it, the Midwest? I love Dayton. I love being in the Midwest, but the Midwest is not known beyond, it has a pragmatism. And so those of us who are a little, shall I say, in the creative realm, we're a little different. We march to a beat of a different drummer. So what was that like once you traveled around, you're coming from these experiences in like Hawaii and other places, and your family said, I'm assuming that your dad settled in Dayton because of Right Pat. I mean,
No, he was Army.
Army.
He
Okay.
he was Army. He was gonna he did he was raised a very poor boy, and he did the Army because of World War II,
Right.
and he felt he should give this to his country, as all the World War II guys did,
Mhm.
and but then he was able to become a doctor, and he felt that because of the military, and he felt that because of that, he should give back to his country. So he did the 20 years giving back to his
Wow.
country. And he was 18 years in and was going to do those last 2 years. And a friend that he'd gone to, uh, uh, not doctor school, what do you call it?
Medical school. I
Medical
mean,
school. Thank you.
yeah,
I couldn't
yeah.
think of that.
Oh, hey,
Uh,
yeah, words. It's all good.
Thank you, Rodney. Medical school. Dr. Alan Bush, and um, he'd been in medical school to do heart, but he had a bad heart himself. And they told him to go into dental school because that would be easier. He'd never be able to do the heart because it would be too tough on him. So he went into dental, and then he met Dr. A.J. Bush, and he knew the children were starting to get. He and Mom felt a little strange because of all these movements, and they were starting to get a little older. And he thought, oh God, maybe we should settle them down. And he said, okay, 2 more years, and then we're going to find a home for them in the Midwest, because both my parents were from Nebraska, Omaha, Nebraska, and Youngstown, Ohio. And they thought the Midwest would be grounding for them. And Dr. Bush's partner had gotten killed in a car accident. So he reached out to my father and he said, do you want to become my partner in this orthodontia thing in Dayton, Ohio? And my dad was like, he really admired Dr. Bush. And he said, God, I'm 18 years in, full retirement. And he really thought he went to Dayton with my mother, thought it was a great town. And he said, yes, I'll do it. And I'll do active reserves for 5 years to make up for the 2 years. And so we went to Dayton, Ohio. And I'll tell you, for all of us kids, it was like we had landed on Mars, because we've been traveling all over the world. And I remember my brother and I both went. It was like Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz. It was like boom. But I will say, first and foremost, the best thing Dayton, Ohio ever gave to me was my husband. My husband that I've been with almost 60 years now.
Wow.
I met him when I was 13 years old. And I saw him, and I knew he was going to be my husband. And I went right over to him and I said, excuse me, I'm going to marry you. Could you please tell me your name? And he flipped out and he looked at me, and he was with all his friends, and they all started laughing like, what the hell? I said, I'm new in the neighborhood. My name is Petah Coyne. And I said, can you tell me your name? And I think I even called him little boy, because I was this size, like 5 feet. I was very big, and then I stopped growing. And then I was like, and he looked at me, got on his bicycle and took off. Well, I'm the daughter of a military man. I just got on my bike and followed him. I was a little aggressive, I guess. And he went into his garage and did not come out. Well, I said, excuse me, I just need to know your name. I'm not going to marry you today. And he didn't come out. Can you imagine how rude that was? So I just knocked on the garage door and nothing. So I said, well, I'm very patient. I'll just wait here. I knew he had to come out sometime, right? No.
I love it. You set your sights, and it was like boom, and that tenacity is just awesome. So the best thing out of the Midwest. I love that 60 years. It's amazing. He eventually did come out, and he eventually did warm up.
Well, his mother came home.
Okay.
And I said, there's a boy in the garage I'd like to meet. And so she lifts up the door and she said, oh, that's my son, Lamar Hall. And they called him Tam at the time because that was his nickname. And I said, oh, thank you so much. I said, I'll be back tomorrow to play. And Lamar goes, oh, Mom, she's so weird. What did you tell her my name for? But I did love him. I loved him so much. And eventually, it did take quite a few years. But
you made an impression.
I did make an impression. His mother never particularly liked me. I guess I was too aggressive. Her name was Happy Hall.
I love
me. Oh well.
Anyway. It's a thing. And so like you said, it was like landing in Mars. That's why I said that the Midwestern pragmatism from this worldly exploring the world. And so I get it from a parental standpoint of that kind of grounding and pragmatism. My parents are very grounding. I love my mom for always saying, oh, Rodney, you work too hard. It's like, It's like, you're always, can you slow down? I'm like, no, Mom, there's things to do, So I
Not so
understand.
much
Yeah,
time.
not so much time. And so we're running and doing things. And so what was it like to kind of like, you knew you were going to be an artist. And so so you started taking classes, and you started taking classes at UD. Did you just start
Yes.
taking classes over the summer? I mean, did they just have, how did
No,
that come about?
when I was in high school, there was a great art teacher there, terrific art teacher, Mr. Carmichael. We all called him C. And I went to Oakwood High School. I went there in 8th grade, which is a horrible time to go because everybody goes there in 7th grade. And I arrived there in 8th grade, which is just a crummy time to arrive. You're
Uh,
awkward,
y-
you know.
and they've all known each other for years.
Up through the middle school.
Right,
And
right, right.
but Mr. Carmichael was wonderful. He had all the outcast in his class, and he allowed me to sign up for 3 or 4 sessions, 4th, 5th, and 6th classes, or whatever they all are in the afternoon. So I could spend the whole afternoon in the art class, all afternoon there with him, and working on something, wax class, and then making bronze castings and doing. He had such outrageous things we were doing at the time. And by the time I was in 10th grade, I had done everything he knew how to do. And so I went to Mom and Dad and I said, listen, I don't want to go to school anymore. I'm bored. I don't want to go there anymore.
Wow.
And they said, well, you have to go. And I said, it's either I run away or you find a way that I don't have to go to school. And they said, it's not up to us. If you can go to the principal and figure out a way you don't have to go to school, we'll stand behind you. And I said, okay, I'll do this. So I went to the principal, and God bless the Oakwood school systems. I went to them and I said, listen, I'm either going to leave school or you have to find a way that I don't have to go to school. And the principal was so shocked. And I remember Mrs. McAngel, who was my guidance counselor, stood behind him and giggled and said, you deal with her. And I'm thinking, well, give me 24 hours to think about this, Petah. We've never quite had a student like you. All right, let me think about this. So the next morning I was there at his class at 8:00, homeroom class. And he brought me in with Mrs. McAngel and he said, okay, how about this? If you can test out of your classes in the fall of all your classes, then you can go to the University of Dayton. How about that? I said, done. Okay. You give me all the homework over the summer. I'll get it all done. I'll test out of them in the fall. And then I go to the University of Dayton. He said, okay, done. So that's what I did. So my mother, blessed be her soul, but had each room in our house, history, math, whatever they were. Each room was a different thing. But my brothers and sisters had to do it with me. Now, this did not engender love between my brothers and sisters. And so they had to go with me from room to room, studying all the different things. And I have a terrible dyslexia. So it wasn't an easy summer, but that's what we did. And then I tested out of all my classes first thing, and then I went down to the University of Dayton and just did art classes, which was grand. I had to sign into homeroom. It was a legal state law. He
Right.
figured that out.
You have to sign
And
in,
then
and
I
then
went down.
it's
Isn't that
amazing.
grand? And that was much to the Oakwood High School generosity. Isn't
absolutely.
that great?
And the fact that you were your family. I mean, granted, the siblings weren't all into it, not loving it. That it's like, wow, I have to study in the summer. I could see that. My brother would probably hate me to this day. But it is that generosity and that sense of knowing. You were demonstrating clearly this is it. There's no plan B. There's no plan C. I need to be in art classes, and at a college level, that is just astounding to me.
Yeah, I just was so bored. I was bored, and they knew I was going to leave. I would have left. I would have left. They must have seen that was it. I was going to leave. I was
Wow.
going to leave.
Like you were just
Yeah,
like, I'm done with this. You would have been the
I'm done.
true, you were going to follow what we would call the bohemian spirit in your soul to just do your
Yeah,
thing. And
yeah,
but I don't think and that's the thing. It's just, it was done with such intentionality.
yeah.
This is not you're not and that's what's so fascinating to me about your pathway in this story, because it's like, nope, nope. It's, it's clear as just, ah.
I'm Bonnie Miles, Membership Coordinator of CET. Thank you for listening to Rodney Veal's Inspired By. This podcast is a production of CET and ThinkTV, 2 local PBS stations. As PBS stations, the work we do online, on air, and in the community is supported by listeners like you. If you're enjoying the show and would like to support our work, please consider becoming a member at cetconnect.org or thinktv.org. Plus, when you sign up to donate at least $5 a month, you'll get access to special members-only streaming videos on the PBS app through Passport. Learn more at cetconnect.org or thinktv.org.
If you're enjoying this conversation, The Art Show, also hosted by Rodney Veal, is available to stream anytime from anywhere on YouTube or the PBS app.
And so so it must have been glorious heaven to be in a college setting, expanding the repertoire of images and the kind of work you were doing. So at that time, what did you consider the kind of the work that you were kind of heading into? Because most of what you're doing is definitely trend, would have probably, and I'm not an art historian per se, but I have taken those classes. I do have an undergraduate. About the 1960s, 70s was this time of transition where how we perceive the art making process and the materialities. I mean, it's UD, it's a Catholic university. I don't, was there an allowance for that sort of deep dive investigation, that kind of experimentation?
It wasn't, it was mostly life drawing classes. I wanted to understand the body. So I was doing, they had life drawing. So I was allowed to do life drawing. There was a lot of painting. I really thought I'd be a painter, although sculpture I really loved. I loved sculpture the most. And I was doing a bronze casting, which was kind of unheard of. And I was going down to the foundries. We had so many foundries in Dayton,
At that, and yes, I know,
at that time.
I
And
do
I would go
remember.
down to these foundries, but I was kind of frightened a little bit because I would go to these foundries and all the men would just stare at me. So I made my mother go with me. Now, mothers at that time were not allowed to wear pants. I don't know if this is way before your time. Remember, this is in the late 60s, early 70s. So my mother had to walk out to her car in her dress, in a skirt and top, in that. And then she would get in the car and then she'd have to pull her pants on because she's going to a foundry, right? She can't go in a skirt
Right.
and then she'd pull on these pants, right? And then we'd go to this foundry together and she would make a piece of sculpture with me. And so that the men wouldn't really bother me too much because her mother was here. What are they going to do to me? Because I was really frightened by them. I could feel, when your senses pick up these, I felt frightened. I felt frightened, truly frightened. And so, but with her there, I didn't feel frightened anymore. They're not going to really hurt me with my mother right there, right? So,
right.
And then I did a lot of bronze castings, but they all look like Degas. You have to work through other artists to get to where you are.
Oh,
right?
yeah, it's so true, isn't it? Not true.
Yeah.
Yes, you kind of
And
have to work through those
I
things.
have
And
them.
you still
I
have
threw
those?
most of them out, but I still have one. Yeah.
Wow.
One.
So
Yeah.
I mean, because you cite some heavy hitters as influences, and they were starting to hit the heyday, probably like the of kind of, not the heyday. I would say it's a different language, the different word for it is your exposure to their presence in the art world, like Eve Hess and Louise Bourgeois. I mean, So what, I mean, I could only imagine seeing uh, Louise's spider sculpture, and just going, yeah, I'm done. I want to go. I want to do that. I'll have what she's having. So
Right. But you remember, she didn't make that till not that
later,
long ago.
oh,
Much,
that's
much later.
much later.
Oh,
But she
oh,
was
much.
but she was experimenting. But besides the spider, but she was about that time. She was doing what she was kind of like very. Her stuff was going places before it kind of distilled into the spiders. I mean, so what was your exposure to them like? I mean, was it at UD or was it after UD?
Oh, no, no. I didn't know. I didn't know Eva Hesse till after I graduated from college.
Okay.
And I knew her work because I went to visit my brother who graduated from Columbia in graduate work. And I went to visit him, and we went to the Whitney, and we found this book
Ooh.
by Lucy Lepard. And I went, oh, whoa. And then I went home, and I had just graduated and from undergraduate. And I went and listened to a talk by Alice Aycock, Jody, oh God, what's her last name? Jody, and Donna Dennis. I can see Jody's finger bridge in Philadelphia. I just can't think of her last name, and I know her really well now. And I heard these three women speak on the Dayton Beautiful Council. They talked about things I had never heard of before, never. And they were all from New York. And I thought, here I am, supposing I'm a sculptor, and I
Right.
don't know anything about their work. I don't know anything about this kind of work. And I'm thinking, what am I doing in Dayton? And I'd come back from the Art Academy of Cincinnati to Dayton. I'd just gotten married to my longtime love of my life. And he was going to graduate school at the University of Dayton and working. And I was working, teaching at the Dayton Art Institute and
Oh,
at the
wow.
children's
Yes.
program,
Yeah.
and working for Dr. Thomas, an eye surgeon. And I thought, I got to get out of here. I got to go to New York. So that day I went home and I said to Lamar, I've got to go to New York. And I said, I know you have to finish school. And I said, but I'll go and I'll find a place for us to live and set everything up. And then when you finish graduate school, you come on. He said, we've only been married like 3 months. And I said, I know. But he said, we waited 8 years to get married. And I said, I know. And he said, so you're going to leave me now and go to New York? And I said, I know. And he said, well, you're not going to leave me here. I'm coming. And I said, but I'm leaving like in a week or two. He said, yes, well, we're leaving together. And I said, great. Okay, fine.
Wow. That's
So
love.
what we
That
did.
he knew your vision. He knew your tenacity. He knew that you had. There's that thing. Some people just get on the bus or they get left behind. That is a phrase.
I like that comment.
It's like, get on the bus.
Get on the bus or get a fine.
Like, good luck to you. I'll be waving to you from the back room mirror. So I mean, but I love the fact that he saw it. He knew it.
I don't
knew
think
that
he
this-
was happy.
Oh, wow, really?
I don't think he liked this. I don't think he liked graduate school. I don't think he liked his job.
So this was a good out exit.
This was he said, done. I'm with you. Let's
Wow.
go.
And you guys have been in New York ever since.
Ever since we moved in with my brother, who did not know I was coming. And he was another nice surprise.
Surprise. Here we go.
And he had just graduated from Columbia, and he was down in Tribeca, which nobody was living down there.
Oh,
And they
no,
had
it's fine.
5,000 square feet down there. I think this was like, what was this year? 76.
76?
And,
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And we went down there and and I rang the doorbell, and the doorbell, of course, didn't ring. And it was just 3 blocks up from the World Trade Tower. And you had to climb 5 flights of stairs. All the soubrettes, hot dog vendors kept all their carts in the bottom floor. You can imagine the bug problem and rat problem in that building. And so you had to climb all the stairs, and no lights, right? So you had to
Right.
feel each step as you went up. And then when you hit about the 5th floor, there were a few steps missing. So make sure that step is there right before. But the 5th floor was glorious because it was all skylit, and at that time, they used to leave on all the lights at the World Trade Towers to advertise it. That shows you the 1970s electricity had tons of money. And it was so beautiful because it was so beautiful. And Tom and a bunch of other graduate students were all there, and they'd all built loft beds. It was such a big space. And so Tom goes, well, what are you doing here? I said, well, Lamar and I've moved here. And he said, where are you staying? And I said, with you. And he's going like, oh God, my little sister's here. Oh Lord. I said, well, not long. I said, just till we find another place. And he's like, oh God, you don't know how hard it is to find spaces in New York. I said, is it really? He said, yeah, it is. He said, do you have a job? I said, no, but I said, I'll get one. And he goes, oh, Petah, they're really hard to find. I said, no, not for me. I'll get one by next Friday. He said, oh, Petah, you don't know. I said, I'll get one. Mark my words. And he said, oh, you probably will. And so, and I had one by Friday. And so anyway, we moved there. And but Tom moved with us to the next place, which is where we still live.
Okay.
And so that's where we live now. We still live there, rent stabilized,
So
great loft.
So you got the inspiration, like you're in New York, which is, that buzz and electricity. And it's not just the electricity, it's just the fact that everybody's who is creative is pushing beyond the envelope, as I describe it. And so you're immersed in this world. What was that like? I mean, you just must have been like, oh,
this is great. But I'll tell you, when I first moved here, I was told in no uncertain terms, I had not read enough. I had not seen enough. I had not done enough. I was not good enough. I was like nothing. And I started to look around, and I could see they were right. They were right. They were 100% correct. 100% correct. So I got a job. First, I got a job at the Strand bookstore.
my favorite place.
Mine too. I know. And the guy told me, we're not hiring. I know. I love that place. I figured if I had to work, I might as well work at a place I love, books, right?
Absolutely.
But it was really true. It was really true. I had to read a lot more. And someone else told me, don't waste your time taking your work around. It's not good enough. And I went around looking around, and I could see my work was not as good. It was not as good. And so, and this curator who lived where we eventually ended up a month later after we moved in with my brother, we found another loft, and there was a curator on the 2nd floor, lots of creative people in this building. And she told me my work wasn't good enough. I was insulted at first, but there was no reason for her to lie to me. And she was right. She said, go look around, go look for yourself. And I did. And she was right. And she said, I'll come every year. She said, work hard. And every Saturday I would go around, spend the whole day looking at galleries. And I had to work hard. I have no trust fund baby here. And I was working full-time in advertising to make enough money to support living in New York.
To live in New York, which is, and also to explore the work. It's not, that's what I love the fact that you talked about. You need to read more, you need to go experience more, you need to see more. And I've always said that, even to those who in the performative arts, how can you perform a work and you don't understand the impetus behind what this choreographer is trying to say? I need you to be, I need you to be more immersed in your humanity.
Yeah.
Fill in the blanks, bro. I had to say, I would say that to my students and and those I
I'm
dance with,
so glad.
because
Yes.
that's a legitimate thing, and that's something like when this podcast is sharing that with people saying, no, you need more information. It's always more. There's always more to be gained and gathered, and it doesn't stop. And so you're in this thing. I mean, you, New Yorkers, I have several relatives from New York who are very brutal in their honesty, which I love. I love them for. That's what I love New York. It's like they're going to tell you the truth. Deal with
Yeah.
it. Deal
Yeah.
with it.
And that's what I think, that's why you're here, because that's why I love to be here. There's always going to be somebody better.
Mhm.
There's always going to be someone who's more that inspires you. And when I go out, I'm always like, whoa, look at that. That is so interesting. And a lot of my older friends go, oh, it's just ridiculous. I'm like, that is so not ridiculous. That is so off the charts. And they're like, what do you mean, Petah? That's ridiculous. And I'm like, well, you may think it's ridiculous. I think it's really interesting, because it's like, have you ever seen anything like that before? And it really is interesting. It makes me think, like, I would have never thought to do that.
And
And
yeah, and to
that's
never
so interesting.
and that's a question that, like I said, when I talked about materiality, it's like the fact that when was that transition into, I call it, I'm just this language of that moment where it, I call it when I had an aha moment, or it clicked. The light bulbs so went off. The room was so illuminated. I was like, oh, it was almost too much information of the light going off. When was that moment like for you? When did it occur? Because I feel like that you must have saw the light. I've seen the light, and you ran with it. I know you saw it and then you just ran. So when was that? About a curiosity.
I think when I started reading a lot, and I started really listening, Robert Rauschenberg and Saul LeWitt and Lucy
Yeah.
Lepard, all those people, they kept saying, that everybody is an individual and nobody should be doing work like anybody else's.
Mhm.
And that you are so unique in your own self, and nobody's come up like you. So how are you making work like nobody else? And I remember thinking, okay, and what are you looking at? What are you thinking about when you do the dishes? What are you
Mhm.
doing when you walk down the street? What is it you look at? And I began to really, so I would walk home every night. I was working at Chanel at the time. And I remember just walking home, and where would I always end up was at Chinatown. And I would always looking at the dead fish. And I'd always think, they're so much more beautiful than anything I'm doing in my studio. And then I thought, so why don't I just take these dead fish and just hang them in my studio? They're so much more beautiful. Why am I wasting my time trying to make something? Why not just hang these dead fish? So then I just started buying all these dead fish, and I just bought thousands of them. And for 5 years, I, painted the walls black and covered the windows with black plastic. I was not looking to be in a gallery. I was not looking to show this work. I was just making this work because I needed to see what it would look like if I would spend a lot of years hanging all these dead fish, spending all my extra money on these dead fish and baby barracudas, and just hanging them. What would this be if that's what I would do? And just work from instinct rather than anything intellectual, anything planned. Just do it. And that's when, for me, that's I didn't do it for anybody. I didn't do it to make it to make money. God knows I didn't do it to make money. And
Right.
and
It just,
that's what it was for.
and I love the fact that I think that's the moment too, when you just, I didn't care. I remember the moment was because I had gone to grad school and I was coming from a ballet background. So I'd studied art up until college, and then I discovered dance, and I started late in life. And there was this opportunity to dance at Dayton Ballet. But long story short, it was like when I went to grad school, they were like, why is your work not representative of the visual art background and the political science background? And I said, well, there's not a lot of political discourse in ballet. She's a bird. Lift her. I don't have, there's no more, there's no more motivation. She's a bird. Lift her. And I said, so here's a chance for me to figure out, why am I moving? Without, it was worth the student loan debt to figure out, well, why am I making and why am I moving? To your point, that room, I can see, that's what I mean. I think in every artist I've ever talked to, we've always said there was this, it doesn't make sense to others, but it makes sense to us.
Yes,
Which
yes,
makes,
and that's all that matters.
and all that matters, and, so, and which makes everyone so confounded. My mother goes, "Oh, what?" It's like, did you have to get naked, Rodney? Did you have to, did you have to do these things? It's, well, yeah, Mom, I had to do that. I had to explore my art, this creative process. And so you're doing this. And so when did you feel that that moment that the work was ready to be seen by the world? When was that for you?
Gosh, I don't even really remember. Isn't that funny?
Yeah.
I just kept working. I can't even remember, to tell you the truth. Wow. Isn't that funny?
No, it's not though. It's not. I mean, I don't remember when I transitioned. I call it a transition. Like it just okay. Well, and
yeah, I'd have to really think back. I'd have to look at my images. I think eventually the fish migrated into the fish eventually gave Lamar terrible eye infections. That was it. And they had to go out because he was gonna go blind. That was it. He got terrible eye infections. And so that was it. So I had to get them out of the loft. And so I decided to put them out. And that was it. So then I decided to give them as a gift to somebody. And I thought it would be a beautiful gift to put them on somebody's, you know how the beautiful homes are in Oakwood. And I thought, what a beautiful gift to put them on somebody's yard and car and flower boxes and across their trees and hanging from their trees and blowing. And so I went to a place called Garden City, which is so like Oakwood. And I thought, oh, it would be so fun if one house had a tsunami that went across their yard and nobody else, just one house. And what a riot for them to open their doors in the morning and think, a tsunami hit our house. Whoa, look at this beautiful art piece. Well, didn't quite happen that way. All my friends helped me do it at 3:00 in the morning. We did the tsunami across this one place that looked exactly like the house across the street from where I grew up, right? And I thought they'd be thrilled. And I stood across the street in my miyake, all ready to have breakfast with them. I thought we'd all talk esoteric things, but no. They came out, they flipped out. I mean, you would think that I had spray painted their house with, kill the pigs or something across their house or something. The father said, one of your kids did this to our house, like, look what they did. They put dead fish everywhere. What does this mean? Is this a code for something? And I was like, and all of a sudden I saw it through their eyes, what I had done to their home. And it never occurred to me. I only saw it as the most beautiful thing and a gift. It was not a gift. And I never, ever, ever, ever did that to anybody ever again. Never did a piece of public art without getting permission, signed by an attorney, that was the next thing I did. But after that, I always got permission,
prior to actually installing, doing the public
Yes.
installation.
I mean, the next big thing I did was a nun on the highway, but that was in Houston, Texas. Texas, of all places, with the fish in the back, But yeah, and I went on to do a lot of public art before I went on to start to do galleries and museums.
And installation pieces, and so just incorporate. And so you talk. There are many articles talk about your voracious reading habits. I mean, and I saw your list of writers, and I was like, oh yes, yes, we must have a conversation. I do want to recommend a book. The only reason why it's my favorite. And I think it's from the beautiful language and the imagery. Michael Cunningham, Flesh and Blood.
Oh, I've read all his books, but I don't know if I've read that one.
It is a multi-generational story of a family's. So it's just, there's some just vivid imagery in there, that powerful stuff. You. So so I know that informs your work. And so I could see this walking and observing and taking it all in and what you're reading. And so it's incorporated into your work. And that's what I mean about when I talk about materialities, the materials reflect that sort of literary investigation. And so that's what I mean when I see things and I go, there's a story or that she knows, but I don't know, but it's telling me a story. And I'm now imagining what that story is. And for those who are creative, we're ready to kind of embrace it. And I was talking about the work that you have at the Dayton Art Institute currently, and how it is beloved. I don't think yours is the work with the two figures who are leaning forward in a chair, correct? And they're connected by hair, which is not hair. It's sort of string. Am I wrong? I'm like, I would hate to say, I was like, do you have a work at the DAI? It's in the Contemporary Gallery.
No, I don't.
You don't?
Mm-mm. Mm-mm. The Dayton Art Institute does not own any of my, they own one print that somebody just gave them.
Really?
No.
Why did I think that was your work? I mean, it's like, because I saw you when I saw your work, doing the investigation. I just had it in my head that I have either that or I have seen it either in St. Louis or New York, and maybe that's it. That's okay. Let's see.
Because I was going to say that does sound like my work.
It sounds like there's something about the materials.
I was going to say someone's copying my work.
Oh God, they better not be.
No, there's a lot of people that do work similar to yours sometimes, and sometimes that's okay.
That's cool. Yeah, that's nice. But
they
have to do something. But you're the originator. You're the one who's in your singularity, your voice, and it's like the materials. That's where when I see the images of your materials, I geeked out because for those who don't know, we had to move spaces for this interview, and I just remember seeing the silk flowers behind you. Oh. And I was just like, oh, I know those are going to get incorporated into something massive.
Into something, yes.
Yes. And so,
yes, that was my working studio.
And so the thing is with materials, I mean, because it's not, like I said, it's not one of the situations where it can be taught in a classroom. Material, like the use of materials that are not intended for their use. Like that's the reason why I love Mark Bradford. He's one of my favorite artists.
He's wonderful. Yeah.
The fact that it was, hey, I'm a hairdresser. I have end papers. I'm going to burn them and layer them on. And I was like, dude, I mean, it's just that sense of, and then I'm going to go. And it keeps growing and evolving once that initial. So yours started with fish, and now you've moved into taxidermy and wax and fabric. And you even got taught by seamstresses how to sew fabrics together so you use it to make art. Is that a part of is it just like are you the kind of artist who's like, I have an idea, I may not know how to construct it, but I'm going to figure it out and then do it.
Oh, yes, definitely, definitely. And or you see something. I saw this one place where they were shredding cars, and then I saw a 1950s Airstream trailer, and then I asked them, could they shred that for me? And it was so outrageously expensive. And even if I used all my NEA grant, I could only afford a quarter of it. So then I convinced another sculptor to buy, so we could buy half of it. She didn't really even want it, but I said, oh, you have to have it. And so we bought half of it. And it was such a beautiful piece. It ended up being such a beautiful piece. And although
Wow.
it's very heavy, and it ended up being used in a performance and then also in a piece. Yeah, we do. Yeah, because it's so fun to mess with me. And I use, taxidermy. I started using taxidermy in the 90s. I love, and mostly because someone said, this museum threw out all this taxidermy. It was in Canada. And she said, I can smuggle it in under my clothes. Do you want it? I said, yes, bring it in. So she acted like she was pregnant and she brought it all in under her clothes. And it was all these beautiful songbirds and everything. And then I paid for her to go back to Canada and bring more in, like three. And they were
I
beautiful, beautiful,
Wow. It's just like,
beautiful.
so like you're just like, and that's why I said about that sense of play and inquisitiveness never stops. And I think
Oh,
and so
see
the work,
something.
yeah, and you see something, and so like, I just love that. I just love the fact that you're just like, let me try something new. And so the pigeonholing, there's no way to pigeonhole you as an art maker and a creative thinker. There's just no
Well,
way.
none of us, I don't think, if you'd have to be dead, I think you just keep going and seeing it. And now I have so many materials here, I can mess with mixing them, which is really fun, really fun. And so that's really great. And the wax isn't a normal wax, it's a patented wax. There's 3
Wow.
patented formulas. And it was made by the guy at Chanel, who made all the lipsticks. And when I realized that the wax was melting, I went to him. I said, can you make me a wax that will hold up for all times? And he said, well, sure I can. It's expensive though, Petah. And he was an Iranian, great chemist, and I wanted it to be really so that it would only melt at 250, 200, 250, and could get really cold too. So it can go down to 40 below zero, but it doesn't really like to move in less than it doesn't like to move in less than 40 degrees, because it'll crack. So and that's why we keep this room cold
Okay. In your space.
when we're not in here. But when
Wow.
we're here and we're working, we really warm it up. It really prefers warmth. And everybody's like, don't send it south. I'm like, it loves the south. It loves the south. And everybody's like, really? So it's funny.
And then it's
Yeah.
just, I just find it amazing. Like I said, it is just that sense of you. It's not just the materials; it's the inquisitiveness behind the choice of
Yes.
materials and the
Yes.
stories behind it. And I think that's what's important, which goes back to those when someone, the hard knocks of New York, the first years back in the 70s, and people saying your work's not good enough, you need to know more, and so you just are constantly exploring the idea of
Yes.
creativity. And
Yeah.
I love the fact, but you're also at the same time really supportive of other women. And I had a conversation with one of our producers here this morning, Anne Rodolanti, and I just said it's not just that you respect that we have to respect women. We have to acknowledge their humanity. We have to acknowledge that they bring things to the table that are above and beyond on the human scale. Period. It's not about respecting. It's about saying, okay, bring it. Come on, let's go.
Yeah.
Get on the
Yeah.
bus. And so and I was thinking about that and that sense of what we do here on the art show. because it's important, because we know, because you've had this longevity of being in a creative practice. It has not always been easy for different voices to be seen and heard, and the art room.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Yeah. And that's why I was saying to you, thank you so much for what you do and who you're acknowledging and who you interview. And the first time I met you, I was so applauding of that, because it's rare that people do that. And may I say it, African American women have it the worst. Although they're starting to come up, still, if you look at the galleries, maybe they have one or two African American women, if they have any. God help us, right? And if they have women at all. Now let's look at the 5 top major galleries in New York. Let's count how many women they have, and then how many African American women they have, or how many Asian women they have, or how many Hispanic women they have. I mean, it's bleak. It's bleak, and it's I don't know. It's just very, very sad. So hopefully, and I don't want it to be 100 years before it changes.
I want the
So,
now, and I totally agree. And it's of the now. The now is, and that's to me what's exciting about what I get to do. It's like I get to go hang out in their studio spaces. I get to break bread with them and just see feel the energy. That's what
yeah,
I want the audience to understand. That's why it's important to go see work, and to go see work that's going to challenge you. Don't just
yes.
go because it's aesthetically pleasing. That is the worst. That's a recipe for blandness. You might as well be giving me mashed potatoes and and baked chicken, as far as I'm concerned.
Mhm.
I want some flavor.
Yeah.
I think the word, and I want to tell that you deserve the flavor. And so that's what I love about your work. It's like, it's flavorful. I
Oh,
mean,
thank
I
you.
no, it's genuine. I mean, I'm so excited. I'm like, I get to. It's like just the fact that you're just like, let's smuggle in birds, taxidermy birds. You're like, let's cut up a stream here. Let's cut up a trailer. I mean, thank you. I'm like, oh, okay. Don't be afraid. I want my mom to shake her head one last time and go, oh, Rodney, you did it again. Don't we all want that response? And so I always ask this question, because I know that people listen to this podcast at different places in their life. What would you tell them about because it is a thing that to take that first leap, so to speak, into the void. What advice would you give them to say, take that leap into the void?
Well, I guess first you have to really want to do it. Because if you don't really want to do it, you're never going to do it. Because there's a lot of people that say they want to do it, but they don't really want to do it. There's a lot there. I would say 50% of the people that say they want to do it, but they don't really want to do it. And so that's number one. But those that truly want to do it, there's nothing gonna stop them. Like nothing stopped you.
No.
And see,
No.
you're just going to jump off that cliff, and you have to do it because you're really you need to do it. There's no choice, but you need to do it. And you're not going to do it for any other reason than just needing to do it. I can't think of any other reason. And you're not going to do it for the money. And someone said to me just recently that you can't put all that pressure on your artwork to like give you fulfilling your soul, fulfilling every part of everything you need in this world, and then make your money. And I thought, that's what kids coming out of school expect. They expect it to do everything for them and then make their living for them too. And maybe I expected that also. And that was maybe where we all went wrong. We expected that. And maybe I would have gotten to the dead fish faster had I not expected that. You know?
No, I totally agree with that. I think that it's really funny because, going back, I'm still, and I love collaborating, especially in doing installation pieces, these performance art pieces it's not all on me. But I'm a part of a team, and that sense of that we're connecting. And so it was so funny to me. It was like, I said, no. I said, save the money, go make some more art with it. I have something that'll pay the bills. This is priceless to get to hang with these artists who I respect and admire and love. Where they're coming from. Why would I put a price tag on that? Please don't sully my good feeling. This feels good. It feels right. And so I think that's what that sense and that feeling. You had to be in that dark room with the hanging fish.
Yes.
You got to be in the space. So,
yeah,
Petah, I'm coming to New York. You and I are going to the Strand.
Yes.
We're gonna talk about
tie my hands. Tie my hands. Do not let me buy another book. If you could see all the books I have, 80 feet of bookcases. No more books for me.
Oh no! Come on.
No, not a one. Not a one.
I will send you a photograph of the stacks and stacks of books that we have in our house.
Good.
And I keep adding, and I refuse to stop.
Well, you're young yet. You're young yet.
Okay. Oh, that's very kind of you. In 2 weeks, I turned 60. So thank you.
You're 10 years behind. You're 12 years behind me. You got 12 years of more buying books, and then you stop at 75. Okay.
Okay.
You got 15 more years to go.
Okay. I love that cutoff. That's awesome.